Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the boutique hotel suite, casting a warm golden hue over the crisp white linens, champagne flutes, and strewn makeup palettes. Laughter buzzed from the bridesmaids as hairdryers whirred in the background, but Savannah sat still in front of the mirror, watching her own reflection with a quiet kind of joy. Her wedding day had finally arrived. She exhaled slowly, adjusting the delicate pearl earring she'd chosen to wear, her grandmother's. It was the only thing she had left from her father's side. Today, everything had to be perfect. Her stylist, Tanya, stood behind her, unzipping the sleek garment bag that held the couture wedding gown. Savannah turned slightly as the bridesmaids gathered around, gasping at the sight of it. The dress was classic but elegant, with intricate lace detailing at the bodice and a gentle train that whispered sophistication. "Let's get you into this masterpiece," Tanya said, her voice chipper. Just as Savannah stepped toward the changing area, the suite door opened. A hush fell over the room like a cold breeze. Delaney stood in the doorway, holding 2 paper coffee cups, her other hand nervously clutching the strap of her oversized leather tote. She wore a bold red jumpsuit and platform heels, dramatic, unapologetic, and completely out of sync with the muted wedding tones around her. "Hey," Delaney said with a tight smile, scanning the room as if bracing for impact. "I thought I'd drop these off. One's a vanilla oat milk, just how you like it." The room remained frozen for a beat. Then Diane, Savannah's mother, stepped forward, her expression sharp as glass. "You weren't supposed to be here." Savannah's face lit up as she rushed across the room and wrapped Delaney in a hug before anyone else could say a word. "You came," she whispered, clinging for just a second longer than necessary. Delaney chuckled softly, arms folding awkwardly around her cousin. "Couldn't let you walk down the aisle without me seeing you off." There was silence again. The bridesmaids exchanged glances. Diane's lips pinched tighter, but Savannah, ever the peacemaker, waved it off and returned to the dress, determined to pretend it was all fine. She stepped into the gown, Tanya and a bridesmaid guiding the lace over her shoulders. Tanya gently pulled the zipper up the back, and then it happened. "Ripe!" A gasp echoed across the suite. The sound was unmistakable, fabric tearing wide open. The lace at the waist had split completely, the zipper holding on by a single desperate thread. "No, no, no, no," Savannah murmured, frozen in place as Tanya's hands hovered in panic. "Oh my God," one bridesmaid whispered. Diane's voice rose, already in fury. "What did you do? You said this was fitted. You said—" "I measured her twice," Tanya said, now as pale as Savannah. "It must have— the seam. I don't know what happened." Savannah clutched her sides, her eyes filling with tears, her vision blurred. And then, softly, confidently, Delaney stepped forward. "Everyone just move back." They all turned to look at her. Her voice wasn't loud, but something in her tone cut through the chaos like a razor. She set her coffee down, pulled a tiny sewing kit from her tote, and knelt in front of the bride. "You're not serious," Diane spat. Delaney didn't even flinch. She looked up at Savannah, their eyes locking. "Let me fix it." Savannah nodded slowly. "Okay." As the others moved aside, a subtle flicker crossed Delaney's face. Her smile sharpened for just a moment, almost smug, or perhaps something more complicated. And then it faded, replaced with quiet concentration as she unspooled a thread and leaned in. Everyone held their breath. The dress was torn. The clock was ticking. And the one woman nobody trusted might be the only one who could save the day. But the question lingered unspoken in the air. Why was she really here? 28 years earlier, the Blake residence in Lagos stood proud behind high white gates and trimmed hedges. The house hummed with quiet affluence, the soft purr of the generator, the house help moving about efficiently, and the distant sound of Evelyn Blake's voice echoing down the hallway as she corrected homework in her study. At 42, Evelyn was the principal of a top private school. She was respected, even feared by some, known for her discipline, sharp intelligence, and zero tolerance for mediocrity. In her pressed skirts and matching blouses, she commanded authority with just a glance. She had a family, a businessman husband, Frederick, often gone before sunrise and rarely back before dinner, and 2 children, Tyler, 10, boisterous and full of mischief, and Elise, 7, a delicate girl with a sharp tongue and her father's calculating silence. Their home lacked for nothing except warmth. The children had their own nannies, tablets, and drivers. They called their mother Ma, never Mummy, and their interactions felt increasingly transactional. Evelyn felt it, even if she didn't speak it, a heaviness in her chest whenever Elise rolled her eyes or Tyler mocked her attempts at bonding. Miriam entered their lives quietly, a slim, dark-skinned woman from the outskirts of Ibadan. Miriam had the kind of humility born from hardship. She barely spoke unless spoken to, cooked perfectly, cleaned without complaint, and lived with her little girl Celia in the small, windowless room behind the house, the boys' quarters. Celia was 5, wiry and always barefoot, with hair in uneven puffs. She trailed after her mother in silence, carrying tiny buckets, folding napkins clumsily. But what caught Evelyn's eye wasn't her chores, it was her gaze. Celia would crouch near the veranda whenever Evelyn sat with Tyler and Elise for after-school revision. She never said a word, just stared, wide-eyed, lips slightly parted, like the words were drifting toward her and she was trying to catch them. One evening, as the sun filtered orange through the mango tree's leaves, Evelyn was packing up the books when she heard the voice, a whisper. "Auntie Evelyn, can I also learn how to read?" She turned. Celia stood there, dusty feet gripping the tiled floor, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes pleading but steady. Evelyn blinked, startled. "What did you say?" Celia gulped. "Please, I want to learn too." The words hung in the air. Something tugged deep inside Evelyn's chest. Not pity, recognition, that hunger, that ache for something bigger than yourself. Evelyn had once had that too. "All right," she said softly. "Come tomorrow, after I finish with Elise and Tyler." The next day, Celia sat on a stool under the mango tree, legs swinging, lips forming the sounds Evelyn taught her. A week later, she was reading short sentences. Within a month, Evelyn began sneaking old textbooks to Miriam's quarters. "Just keep these safe," she said, feigning nonchalance. Miriam, eyes wet with gratitude, whispered, "God bless you, Ma." The arrangement became part of the rhythm of the house. Celia would wait patiently for her turn. She never demanded, never complained, and Evelyn, for reasons she couldn't quite explain, looked forward to those 10 minutes with her, more than the hour she spent arguing with her own children. But not everyone approved. One afternoon, Elise stomped off, flinging her workbook on the floor. "Why are you wasting time with the maid's child? She's not even supposed to be here." Tyler snorted. "Maybe Celia can clean better if she learns big words." Evelyn stared at her children. "That's enough." "But why, Mummy?" Elise whined. "You never used to do this before." Evelyn stood, her voice firm. "Education isn't a privilege. It's a right. If Celia wants to learn, she'll learn. And if I choose to teach her, I will." That night, Frederick barely listened when Evelyn mentioned it. "She's a maid's child," he muttered. "Don't get too involved. They're kind." "They're kind?" Evelyn's voice cut sharp. "You mean children with dreams?" He didn't respond, just returned to his spreadsheets. Evelyn sat alone that night, grading papers at the dining table. The house was quiet, but her mind wasn't. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to purpose again. Not in the private school halls where she reigned, but under the mango tree, beside a child whose eyes reminded her why she'd become a teacher in the first place. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Evelyn was in the middle of a staff meeting when her phone buzzed. Elise slipped on the staircase. "Slight sprain. Please come." Within 20 minutes, she was at the school. Elise sat on a bench outside the nurse's office, her ankle wrapped and resting on a small stool. Evelyn knelt beside her, examining the swelling, but something else was off. The air around them was electric, not with concern, but with whispers. 2 mothers stood a few feet away near the playground, shielding their mouths, but making no real attempt to whisper quietly. And there she was, that maid's daughter, inside the school grounds, not even in uniform, in the compound, with Evelyn's children. "This is a private school, not a charity." Evelyn straightened slowly. The school nurse avoided eye contact. A few other teachers watched from a distance. By the next day, she was summoned to the board. It wasn't an official meeting, just a conversation, the headmistress had said, but the tone was anything but casual. Seated across from her were 3 board members and the PTA chairwoman, a woman with a bright scarf and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Mrs. Blake," she began, "we've had reports. It appears a non-enrolled child, the daughter of your house help, was seen on campus, after hours." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Yes, Celia. I was giving her some extra lessons after my children's session. A pause. With respect, one of the board members said, "You do understand the implications? This is a premium private school. Boundaries matter. There are rules. Gatekeeping exists for a reason. Are we seriously having this discussion because I helped a child learn how to read?" Evelyn's voice was calm, but it cut. "It's about optics," the chairwoman said carefully. "If every domestic staff child starts showing up, what happens to the value of exclusivity we offer? These are paying parents." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She didn't speak again. When she got home that evening, her husband was waiting. Frederick was pacing, wine glass in hand, his tie loosened. "You embarrassed us." "I taught a little girl to read," she said, setting down her bag. "You let her into our children's school. Evelyn, do you understand what you've done? These people talk. I don't care what they say. Celia is bright. She wants to learn. She's not our responsibility," he snapped. "And she's not our child. But she could be." Her voice cracked. "If Elise had been born in Miriam's shoes, wouldn't she deserve the same chance?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're risking our name, our position, for a maid's child." Miriam stood in the hallway, frozen, having heard enough. That night, she knocked softly on Evelyn's bedroom door. "Ma, I think maybe I should go. Me and Celia, before it causes more problems." Evelyn looked up from her journal. Her eyes were tired. Her voice was soft. "No, Miriam, you stay. This house needs fewer cowards, not more." But from that day forward, the lessons changed. Celia no longer came to the school. Instead, she met Evelyn quietly in the evening, behind the garage or in the garden when the house was asleep, sometimes in the pantry, crouched between canned beans and rice bags, sounding out words by flashlight. Evelyn bought her notebooks, hidden in brown paper bags. She told the driver to say nothing. She ignored Elise's cold stares and Tyler's sarcasm. She knew what she was doing was risky, but it felt right. The wedge between her and Frederick widened. He started sleeping in the guest room. He left the house before dawn. He stopped asking about the children. And when he did speak to Evelyn, it was only to argue. "You've changed," he said one night. "You're not the woman I married." "No," she said. "I'm someone better." 3 years later, he left, filed for divorce, said she'd become emotionally unavailable, obsessed with causes, and disconnected from the family. She didn't fight it. The only lawyer she needed was a receipt showing Celia's first full year of tuition, paid in full, under someone else's name, anonymous sponsor. When the papers came, she signed them in silence. Then she went to the mango tree, where Celia now read chapter books out loud, and said, "Let's try something harder today." The house was too quiet. Evelyn had never realized how loud silence could be until her children were gone, and the walls stopped echoing with footsteps, doors slamming, or even arguments. The air inside her once busy home in Surulere had a stillness that felt like grief. Tyler had left first, not for the right reasons. At 21, he was suspended from university for involvement in a credit card scam. Evelyn had rushed to Abuja to speak with the school administration, but the shame lingered, even after the issue was resolved. He never returned to campus. He claimed he wanted to find his own path, but it involved late nights, strange phone calls, and vague business ventures that made Evelyn uneasy. Elise, ever her father's daughter, drifted like smoke through her mother's life. She lived in Lekki now, married a wealthy entrepreneur, and called once a month. Always rushed, always distracted. "Mum, I don't know why you're so obsessed with the past. I just wanted to hear your voice." "Okay, well, I'm busy. Talk later." Talk later meant another long week of unanswered messages. And then there was Celia, sweet, hungry for knowledge Celia, who used to fall asleep with her face in textbooks Evelyn smuggled out of her old office, who clapped her hands with delight when she got her first A in English, who cried the day she got her scholarship letter to study medicine at the University of Cape Town. Evelyn remembered standing at the airport, watching Celia wave from behind security, cheeks damp with tears, voice muffled behind the glass. "Thank you, Ma. I'll never forget you." But she had. Celia never called, never wrote, not even a postcard. At first, Evelyn told herself it was the excitement of a new life, the busyness of studies. She told herself Celia would write after the first semester, then the first year, then graduation. 5 years passed. Miriam moved away shortly after Celia left, returning to her hometown in Enugu. Evelyn helped her set up a small grocery stall, sent money regularly, but even she stopped calling, said she didn't want to be a burden. Evelyn never told Celia she had continued to support her financially. The scholarship covered most things, but the hidden expenses, lab fees, flights, accommodation gap, Evelyn quietly took care of through a mutual friend who worked at an embassy. But gratitude never came. Some nights, Evelyn would sit by the window with a cup of tea and scroll through old photos on her tablet. Tyler's sullen teenage face, Elise in her ballet uniform, smiling with crooked teeth, and Celia, radiant even as a child, holding up a spelling bee trophy with wide, disbelieving eyes. The worst part wasn't the absence, it was the doubt. Had she misread the entire relationship? Had Celia only seen her as a stepping stone? One rainy afternoon, Evelyn opened her old drawer, the one she used to hide report cards and letters from Celia's teachers, and ran her fingers over the yellowing papers. Excellent progress. Gifted in the sciences, a leader among her peers. She wiped her glasses with the hem of her sleeve. She had loved Celia like a third child, and yet there was no wedding invite, no graduation picture, not even a message to say, "I'm all right, Ma." Her children resented her. That much was clear. When Elise visited 2 Christmases ago, she'd made a cutting remark over lunch. "You gave more attention to that Maid girl than you gave to your own daughter." Evelyn had quietly placed her fork down. "That girl earned my attention. You demanded it." Elise never came back after that. And Tyler, well, he showed up only when he needed help. A business loan, rent, bail, always with empty promises and tighter hugs that never reached his eyes. The house, once alive with music, school bags, and the smell of jollof on Sundays, now smelled of dust and lemon-scented furniture. Evelyn wandered through it like a ghost, dusting books she no longer read, watering plants that never flowered, talking to herself just to hear a voice in the room. Every sound felt like memory, every silence like abandonment. She still kept a small wooden box near her bed. Inside, Celia's first drawing, a stick figure woman holding a book, with "Thank you, Auntie Evelyn" scrawled across the top. Some nights, Evelyn would open it and stare for hours. Was that love? Or was it gratitude dressed as love? She didn't know anymore. One morning, as the sun broke through the blinds, she sat at the kitchen table and stared into her tea. Not warm enough, not bitter enough, like her life. She reached for her phone, hovered over Tyler's contact, then Elise's, but she didn't press call. She couldn't bear another voicemail, another cold voice filled with duty, not affection. Instead, she opened an old email chain, one she'd sent updates to when Celia first left for university. The last message was 5 years old. Subject line, "Just checking in," unanswered. She hit co. The hospital room hummed faintly with machines, steady, rhythmic reminders of time passing. Evelyn lay propped up by pillows, the crisp white sheets tucked neatly around her frail body. Outside, the Lagos sun glinted off the window pane, casting fractured light on the tiled floor. Celia stood at the foot of the bed, flipping through Evelyn's chart, her expression unreadable, calm, composed, as though this were any other patient. But Evelyn couldn't take her eyes off her. "Celia," she said softly, voice trembling with the wear of years and something deeper, something wounded. "Why?" The younger woman looked up slowly, her face a careful balance of strength and sadness. She walked around to Evelyn's side and gently took her hand. "Why did you never write?" Evelyn asked. "Never call? Not even once?" Her voice cracked. "I thought I was important to you." For a long moment, Celia said nothing. Then she pulled the visitor's chair closer and sat, her posture unraveling as the years caught up to both of them. "You were," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were the most important person in my life." Evelyn blinked, not expecting that. Her throat worked around the lump rising. Celia continued, eyes distant. "Mummy, Miriam, she died my first year abroad. Cancer, fast, aggressive. I couldn't even come home for the funeral." Evelyn gasped softly. "No one told me." "There was no one to tell," Celia said. "She kept it hidden from me until it was too late. She didn't want me to worry, said I had to focus on my studies, that it was my only chance." Celia looked away, her eyes shining. "I was alone, Ma, utterly alone, in a place where I had no one, no anchor, no family, and the one person I wanted to call," she looked back at Evelyn, "was you." "Then why didn't you?" Evelyn asked, her voice breaking. "I would have flown there if you asked. I would have—" "I know," Celia said quickly. That's why I couldn't. Evelyn frowned in confusion. Celia took a deep breath. Because I didn't want to return to you as a debt, as a burden, as a story you told others about the girl you helped. I didn't want to be the girl who was rescued. I wanted to be the woman who stood beside you. Evelyn's eyes welled. You said once, Celia continued, you don't need a name to build your future, just knowledge. You said that to me under the mango tree. I held onto it like a rope through the dark. I never knew, Evelyn whispered. No, you couldn't have, Celia said gently. I barely knew myself, but after Mummy died, I wanted to quit. I was lost. Then I found your old notes tucked in my bag, handwritten lessons you'd given me back when I was little. I clung to them like a life vest. Celia paused, her voice thick with emotion. I worked 3 jobs. I studied harder than I ever thought possible. I cried more nights than I can count. But I promised myself, if I ever returned, it would be not as the girl who sat at your feet, but as the woman who could stand eye to eye with you. Evelyn covered her mouth with a trembling hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was never ungrateful, Celia whispered. I was just trying to be worthy. You were always worthy, Evelyn choked. Celia reached out and gently wiped a tear from Evelyn's face. I'm here now, Ma. Not because I have to be, but because I want to be. You gave me a life. Let me care for yours. Evelyn's lips quivered. I thought you forgot me, that maybe I was just a chapter you outgrew. Celia smiled sadly. You weren't a chapter. You were the foundation. They sat in silence, the kind that heals rather than hurts. Evelyn reached for Celia's hand and held it tight. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice steady for the first time. Not because of the title or the degree, but because you came back, on your own terms. Celia leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. I never left, Ma. I just had to become the kind of woman you believed I could be. And in that small, sterile hospital room, something fractured between them mended, quietly, beautifully. Not with apologies, but with truth. With love remembered and finally understood. Evelyn's hospital room no longer felt sterile. The scent of antiseptic had faded beneath the fresh lilies Celia brought every week. A soft shawl covered Evelyn's lap, hand-woven by one of Celia's patients' mothers. The atmosphere had changed, quieter, warmer, alive with purpose. Celia was there almost every day now, not just as a physician, but as something deeper, an anchor, a presence. She handled Evelyn's checkups herself, reviewed her medications, adjusted her diet, and even argued gently with the nutritionist on Evelyn's behalf. But it was the conversations, those long, unhurried ones between sips of tea, that mattered most. They talked of everything, the smell of rain on old earth, the echo of chalk on blackboards, the dreams Evelyn once held tight, and the dreams she had let go of. Celia listened, always quietly, her gaze unwavering, and Evelyn, for the first time in years, felt heard. I should have done better with Tyler and Elise, Evelyn confessed one evening, her voice soft. I poured myself into what I believed was right, but maybe I poured it all in the wrong direction. Celia shook her head gently. You gave me a future when you were losing yours. That wasn't failure, Ma. That was love. Evelyn blinked fast, swallowing emotion. But I lost them. Maybe, or maybe they're still finding their way, like I had to. There was silence between them then, comfortable and forgiving. A week after she was discharged, Evelyn sat in her garden, the same one where Celia once watched from the shadows of the veranda. A neighbor dropped off the local paper. Evelyn flipped it open lazily and then froze. There, in the corner of page 6, was a photo of Celia, smiling, confident, standing in front of a chalkboard surrounded by a cluster of girls in blue uniforms. The headline read, Doctor launches grant for girls' education in Lagos. Below, in bold, the Evelyn Blake Girls Grant, a program to provide tuition, mentorship, and school supplies for promising girls from underserved communities. Inspired by a former educator who changed one life forever, Evelyn stared, stunned. Celia hadn't said a word. She folded the paper slowly, her hand trembling slightly, not from age, but from awe. A quiet tear slipped down her cheek, not from pain, but something very close to peace. That evening, when Celia arrived, Evelyn simply held up the paper. You named it after me, she said, voice shaking. Celia smiled. Of course I did. Evelyn stood slowly, walked over, and embraced her. You didn't have to. I did, Celia replied, because without you, there wouldn't be a me. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found a new rhythm. She began volunteering twice a week at a small community school just outside the city, not as a principal, but as a mentor. Her lessons weren't about grammar or arithmetic anymore. They were about life, resilience, and grace. She sat with girls under dusty ceilings, teaching them how to dream out loud. She brought old chalk and new ideas. She smiled more often now, and sometimes, when a girl raised her hand shyly to ask, "Auntie Evelyn, can I learn more?" she saw a flicker of another face from long ago, barefoot, curious, and filled with longing, and she would nod, always. "Yes, that's why I'm here." The gates of the foundation creaked open gently, and Evelyn stepped through, her cane tapping softly against the paved walkway. The sun cast a golden sheen on the newly painted buildings, where bright murals of girls, reading, drawing and dreaming, stretched across the walls. Laughter echoed from the courtyard, high, light, free. She paused at the entrance, her gaze resting on a brass plaque mounted on the outer wall. She leaned in, her hand brushing the cool metal. "In honor of Evelyn Blake, the woman who taught one child and unknowingly healed a generation." Her breath caught. Behind her, a young teacher was guiding girls into class. Some waved at her shyly, others too lost in excitement to notice. One girl, about 8, turned mid-run and beamed at Evelyn with the same wide-eyed curiosity Celia once had. Evelyn smiled back, her eyes brimming but steady. Celia appeared beside her, clipboard in hand, but today she was not a doctor, just a daughter in spirit. She placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "They all know your name," Celia said softly, "but one day they'll know your story too." Evelyn looked out at the classrooms, at the chalkboards and mismatched desks, at the girls who ran barefoot without shame, who laughed with no fear of silence, and in that moment, the ache that had lingered in her heart for decades, the regret, the loss, the wondering, began to ease. A voice within her, perhaps a memory, perhaps something deeper, spoke quietly. "I thought I had lost everything, but in teaching one forgotten girl to read, I unknowingly wrote my life's most powerful story." She didn't need applause. She didn't need to be understood by the ones who had walked away. These girls, this space, this peace, was enough. She took a seat under the old almond tree and watched as the next class began, their voices rising like a hymn. And there, surrounded by the very hope she once planted, Evelyn Blake finally rested, not in silence, but in quiet joy. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.